Veterans Chronicles is sponsored by the state of Qatar, representing Qatar's commitment to the U.S.
Our guest this week on Veterans Chronicles is U.S. Army Ranger veteran and Sergeant First Class Michael Schlitz. Sergeant Schlitz served 14 years in uniform, including time in Iraq. In 2007, his life changed forever when a roadside IED struck the vehicle he was riding in, killing 3 friends and leaving him severely wounded. He joins me now in studio, and Sergeant Schlitz, thanks very much for being with us.
I appreciate you inviting me in.
It's great to have you. Let's start at the very beginning. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Milan, Illinois, which is part of the Quad Cities. Didn't spend a lot of time there, though. I've kind of lived everywhere. My dad was an engineer, so him and mom were contract. So to date, I've lived in about 18 different states, and so I just say I'm American.
Nice, 18 different states. That's impressive. When did you join the service?
I joined at 1996, just because I was a rebellious teen, a little bit on the immature side. Life was all about me at that point in time too, and I wasn't ready for college. Knew I'd partied off, so decided to go into the military and pretty much fell in love with it.
Why the Army?
Well, my brother had already joined the Army. Plus, we all grew up on the classic movies, and we all know what infantrymen are. Before basic and AIT was even over, I just fell in love with it. I like the routine. I like the discipline. I like the everyday challenges. That you can always get better kind of attitude. So I fell in love with it, and I knew it was going to be a career for me.
How soon did you know you wanted to do Ranger School?
Oh, right away. I mean, again, actually Ranger wasn't something I was real aware of before I went into service. I think there's a lot more because we have internet access and more stories out there now that people know what Rangers were. Going in the military, I didn't know what a Ranger was, but by the time I started seeing people in basic and started hearing the stories, then it was nothing for me to want to challenge myself to take the next step.
What was it about the Rangers that was so attractive?
The amount of training that goes into it. You have to be better. You're in the top % at that point, so you constantly have to prove yourself to your peers and be just as good, if not better, than your peers. And you don't necessarily get that in all the Army units that are out there.
What was the most challenging part of Ranger training for you?
I always say there's 2 types of Rangers. There's a sleepy Ranger and a tired Ranger. and for me, I was definitely a tired Ranger. I can live on a little bit of food, but you take my sleep away and I get cranky.
So sleep deprivation is part of that?
Sleep deprivation, food deprivation. You run on about 3,000 calorie diet during that time frame, but you're burning about 8,000 to 9,000 calories a day. So when I started Ranger School, for example, at the time, was always kind of a real small in stature, 5'6", 150 pounds. And 2 months later, when I was coming out of the swamps of Florida, I weighed 116 pounds. So, I mean, if you think about 2 months, it's a great crash diet.
That's one way to do it. Not a lot of chubby Rangers is what you're telling me.
Not afterwards, because there is some science behind that starvation side, that when you start eating again, you've starved your body, that you start kind of putting some of the fat on. So some of the guys get a little chubby right after school, and then, we kind of thin back down.
Gotcha. So where did they send you after basic school and after the Ranger School?
So I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and from Fort Lewis went to Korea to Fort Campbell back to Korea, and then Ranger instructor on to Fort Drum. So I've seen a couple different areas.
Was it the first or second tour in Korea when 9/11 occurred?
That was my second tour, and I was actually on vacation at the time, and I just wanted to do a little bit of traveling. And just south of the Korean Peninsula, there's an island there called Jeju. It's like their version of Hawaii. So I spent a few days there. I'd flown back into Seoul. The next morning I was due to go to Bali, Indonesia. So I went to dinner, was going to get some rest, and at dinner, we're watching the football games. And all of a sudden it flipped to the first tower being hit. And it was like a movie. Nobody thought it was real. So we were all upset that they changed the channel from the football game. And then when we saw the second tower get hit, then we knew, okay, this is the real deal. And I didn't even finish my dinner. I paid my bill, jumped a cab back to the hotel, and when I picked up my work phone, it was like, hey, vacation's over, time to come back. And basically, at the time, I was in charge of a 6-man reconnaissance team, and we started running patrols just to kind of figure out what North Korea was going to do at the time, because, with 9/11 happening, we weren't sure if they'd find that as a level of weakness for us or a good time to attack. So we just wanted to be on high alert in case something went wrong.
After Korea, where did they send you?
Then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, to become a Ranger School instructor, the first phase of the 3 phases of Ranger School.
And so it was 2006 that you were deployed to Iraq?
So I left Fort Benning in early 2006, signed into Fort Drum, New York in March of 2006, and we deployed in August of 2006 to the southwest side of Baghdad. A lot of people know it as the Sunni Triangle, but at the time the media referred to it as the Triangle of Death.
So that's Ramadi and Fallujah?
Yeah, Fallujah, Ramadi, Taji, Baghdad. I mean, that kind of whole big triangle, it was just a devastating time. I mean, not that other parts of Iraq weren't just as violent, it's just that area was riddled with IEDs, and that was what was getting us at the time. I always kind of like to explain what that's about, because a lot of people don't understand Iraq and the violence of Iraq. So when we invaded in 2003, going into 2004, we didn't have a lot of killed in actions or wounded in actions. The enemy didn't know how to fight us. They didn't know our operating procedures. So they do like anybody does. I mean, they're a smart enemy. They studied us, figured out how we operated, found out our weaknesses. I mean, back then we were rolling with barely any armor on any of our vehicles. And so they started hitting us with these roadside bombs, these IEDs, and our casualty rate doubled. Our killed in actions doubled. And so the U.S. response to that, and what many people call the surge, is when we sent 3 times more soldiers over to Iraq and did a big push across the whole countryside, one, to find the IEDs and push the insurgents out. But when you have that many people over there, it basically, if they set off an IED, they're going to get somebody. So our numbers tripled. We lost 3 times more people that 1 to year and a half than we did any other time in Iraq. And then in 2008, going into 2009, the numbers lowered again. And then by 2010, the numbers were minuscule. I mean, every death, everybody injured, I mean, their stories and their lives matter. But if you compare it to what was going on in that, 06, 07 time frame, I mean, we're just taking unrealistic numbers.
Let's talk about the day that changed your life, February 27th, 2007. What was the objective that day, and explain what happened?
So the very first part of my tour, I was a basic infantryman. We did, looking for the caches, setting up battle positions, doing cordon searches. And so, I basically lived on the economy. And what we do is we take over these houses, and we'd go in and we'd search it. And if we found contraband, we'd arrest them. If we didn't, we'd give that family a ticket, and they could go to Baghdad and get paid. But they had 8 hours to get out of their house. And the whole community would come in, and they got those houses. By the time we went in 8 hours later, there was nothing left. The reason I kind of explain that a little bit is because I think about if I went home tonight and somebody came in my house and gave me this ticket and told me 8 hours to get out, there's no way even if I call my friends, there's no way we're getting all our stuff out. So I just kind of put that into perspective. And about 6 months into my deployment, I flip-flopped with my sister platoon, who was attached to the engineers at the time, and they were doing road clearing missions. So it was their job to drive around and look for those IEDs. And that platoon, they're younger soldiers, wasn't really getting the infantry experience. So we kind of flip-flopped. They took over my sector, and I took over their job. And so in January of 2007, I took over that job. And so 2 months later, on 27 February 2007, it started out like any other day. We got the guys up. We gave them the mission brief. We made sure we had all our equipment. We did a couple rehearsals, and we pretty much started our patrol for our 15-hour day. And we were about 2 to 3 hours into it. It was just after daybreak, still pretty early in the morning. And you always plan your route so you don't cross over the same area at the same time so you can be ambushed. But we had a dead-end road that we had to clear, so we had no choice but to go down and come back. And one of the things I forgot to mention, though, is so I had 4 heavily armored vehicles, and then I had 1 Humvee. And the reason I had that Humvee is because there were so many IDs at the time, the mechanics couldn't turn our vehicles around fast enough. So in order for me to make mission, I had to put that vehicle into my convoy, and I made it my vehicle in the rear, because typically the rear vehicle really didn't get hit that often. And so when we got those vehicles turned around and started coming back up, I still to this day remember hearing the boom. And before I could even say a choice 4-letter word, kind of putting it politely, I can remember hitting the ground. And whenever you hit the ground, we consider, or attacked in a surprising manner, we call that an ambush. And when you get ambushed, whether it's gunfire, an IED, however, rockets, however you get ambushed, you always want to take a second just to kind of get a battle damage assessment of what's going on, so you can make the best kind of calculated decision that you can in that split moment. And so I saw my vehicle, really didn't see anything out of the ordinary about it, but I didn't see my guy, so I instinct kind of kicked in to go check on my guy, so I started running for my vehicle. And as I neared the Humvee, I could actually feel the flames hit me on the face, and that's when I realized I was on fire. And I felt like the majority of the flames were actually in my torso area. So I made the decision to go ahead and just real quickly get the body armor off me so that whatever flames were on there were off. And then I started to roll. And, got a couple rolls in, and my muscles just locked up. And I was face down in the dirt and just burning alive. And everybody has a different way that they view that what they consider, facing death, whether it's their life flashing in front of them, their loved ones. But for me, it was real simple. It was just, I'm going to be face down here in the dirt of Iraq. This is how I'm going to die, burning alive. And I was in excruciating pain. I mean, the agony of being burned alive is so intense. It's almost so hard to put words in to describe it. It's that bad. And as those thoughts were kind of coming over me that I was going to die, I could start to hear my guys yell for me. And I didn't know how far away they were. I didn't know what they could do for me. So it really didn't give me any hope. And then they hit me with that fire extinguisher. And 2 things kind of came over my body at that moment. One is the physical side of things. And it was like a blanket of ice just being laid on me. And it just instantaneously took away that pain. It felt so good, so much relief. Just going from that agonizing to basically a peaceful calm coming over your body. And the second part of that would be the emotional aspect. And the emotional aspect is you go from laying there in the dirt, burning alive, face down, thinking, this is how I'm going to die. This is it for me, to, okay, my guys are here. They've gotten to me. They've helped me. Okay, now I have a fighting chance to still survive. And right after they put me out, 2 of my young guys were going to just grab me and start pulling me off the road. And I had this young sergeant who I had disciplined quite harshly for some bad decisions. And I was actually attempting to put him out of the Army. And, he told the guys to stop, and he made him put me on a spine board. And he knew if they dragged me, they were going to kill me. Because if you think about, and I use the reference just to kind of visually let people know what it was like, is basically it had just been cooked. So if you think about the baked chicken that you just pulled out of the oven, and how the skin and the bone just kind of, meat falls right off the bone. I mean, had they drugged me, they would have killed me. I mean, just that quick. And had the dragging not killed me, the infections probably would have killed me. So here's a guy who was actually going after, who still knew what it was like to have that brotherhood, who knew what it was like to be in combat, who knows that no matter what goes on, that you still watch your brother's back, made that decision to help save my life.
You got a chance to talk to him?
I have, and he's one of those that is still struggling over the years. Besides me being injured, my gunner, my medic, were killed basically what we believe instantly on impact, and my driver was burned alive in the vehicle, wasn't able to escape, and so there's harshness to all that, and unfortunately that's what war is, and so it still kind of haunts him to this day, and I've gotten the chance to talk to him on several occasions, and I've seen him on a couple occasions as well, and hopefully he'll bounce back at some point. It just takes everybody a different amount of time.
So he has helped to save your life by telling people what not to do. How soon did the medevac come?
The medevac landed actually probably about within 10 minutes of impact, just because where we were patrolling at the time was in a good proximity of the helipad, so they were able to get to us pretty quick. And from there, they took us into the green zone. I was in my first operation within an hour of impact, and years went by, and I finally got to talk to the surgeon who worked on me, who happened to be an Air Force colonel who had been over there for like 2 years. Said that they never got attacked, and the one time that they were attacked with rockets, I was on the operating table, and they were trying to save my life, and I kept flatlining, and so they were trying to save my life as these rockets were going off, and I had to stay in Baghdad for about 24 hours while they sent a special aircraft down from Landstuhl, Germany, to get me. Once I was stable enough, they moved me to Landstuhl. Had to have another surgery in Landstuhl, flatlined 3 more times in Landstuhl. Was there about 48 hours, and then finally was stable enough to make the trip to San Antonio, Texas, to Brooke Army Medical Center.
And that leads into a whole new chapter, because pretty much right away they put you in a medically induced coma, correct?
Yeah, the first 4 months of my post-injury was all in a medically induced coma, and there's good reasons for that. I mean, the procedures that I had to go through during that time, I'm actually pretty thankful I don't remember them. I mean, from the initial debriding, where they take large razor blades and scrape your body. They had to lay cadaver skin over my open wounds because I had no skin, and you can't just harvest skin and throw it on you. And like I was burned to 85% of my body. I lost both my hands due to the fires. I was basically legally blind at that point. Couldn't walk, so I had 15% of my body that they had usable skin that they had to harvest to be able to cover my entire body. But you can't just keep going back to the same donor site and back to the same donor site. You have to take so much skin from that donor site, let it heal, and then come back for more. So it was a long process.
We'll be right back with Sergeant Michael Schlitz, Army Ranger veteran and Sergeant First Class. Welcome back to Veterans Chronicles. Honored to be joined in studio today by U.S. Army Ranger veteran and Sergeant First Class Michael Schlitz. And we were just talking, Sergeant, about the medically induced coma and all the horrific procedures that you're blissfully glad that you didn't have to consciously endure during that time. What are some of your first memories coming out of that coma?
Well, coming out of the medically induced coma just means that you're somewhat aware. Even when I was in the medically induced coma, which I have no recollection of, like I go back and I talk to my mother and my brother. They used to talk to me, and I would, interact with them. I just had no idea I was doing it. No memory whatsoever. And so when they started to lessen the drugs to kind of make me more coherent and what they say, bring me back to reality a little bit more, it's kind of an skewed kind of reality because you're still on heavy drugs. And I remember my mother and my brother coming into my hospital room, and everybody who came into my room had to have these masks on with the yellow robes and the blue gloves. My brother, who was a couple of years older than me at the time, had like these wheelie shoes with the little wheels on the heels. He used to skate around, so he comes flying into the room and stuff, and I was like, how long have I been out? Like, what kind of future is this? Like, what are they wearing, I mean, it's like some of the old movies, when you talk about the future stuff, they're always wearing these weird, unique outfits and stuff. And so I really thought I was in the future at the first couple little bits. And we always had some laughable moments, like me seeing leprechauns and kangaroos in the room. And but then there's a harsher side of it too. There's, the reason they say bring it back to reality is, coming out of the coma, like a good part of my brain still said I was in combat. And so every time I kind of revert back to combat stuff, they had to bring me back. And because of the medical procedures I had to do at the time, like they had my arms up in these slings and they were tied down, and both my legs were up in the harnesses. And so I was basically trapped in the bed. I wasn't going anywhere. And I remember the cleaning people coming in, and depending on which one it was, is what language they were speaking, and it was a foreign language to me that I didn't recognize. And so I thought I had been captured. I thought I was a POW. I mean, I was being, in my mind, being tortured. Every time they'd take me to the shower to go through the deep breathing process that I was still going through at the time, which was excruciating pain. Being tied down, foreign language, torture. I mean, I thought I was a POW, so I was reverting back to some of the survival training I had gone to. And one of the things they teach you is when you're on the move or being transported, sometimes their mind, they're looking at other things that are going on, not necessarily you, so it's a good time to try to escape. And so every time they'd roll me out of my hospital room to take me to the breathing process, I would try to escape. I'd get real agitated. I'd start to wiggle out. And they always just thought it was because I didn't want to go to the shower. And realistically, I was trying to escape. And even in my rooms, I would do it sometimes. So they had to keep a close eye on me because there was a couple close calls. And that was almost, I had both arms out of the slings, had my feet out, had half my body hanging over the bed. Now, that's all great, but at the time I couldn't walk. I couldn't even stand up. So even if I would have just fallen on the floor and laid there. But I didn't know that at the time.
When did you finally grasp what was going on?
Probably towards the 6-month mark. A little bit more recollection, a little bit knowing more stuff. I mean, I knew where I was. I knew what I had to do. At that point, towards the end, about the 6-month mark, they started standing me up. I can remember getting pulled out of bed, and my physical therapy that day would just be stand up in one spot. And then that turned into, okay, today we're going to take a step. Today we're going to take 2 steps. Today we're going to walk to the door. Now we got to move into the hallway. And it just kept building up. And over the next 4 months was moved, the first 6 months ICU and then the burn ward. And still had to go through the physical therapy in the burn ward too. And even when they released me at the 10-month mark out of the hospital to go be able to live outside of the hospital, I mean, majority of my time I was still in a wheelchair. I wasn't fully walking yet.
This was also a time where you had some emotional and mental struggles with everything that was going on. How did that manifest itself, and how did you deal with it?
Well, I think a lot of it just really boils down to depression. You had this life-altering injury, and my entire adult life, I was a soldier, and I was viewed as a leader, and, that basically that identity I had was taken away from me. People still call me sergeant. People still, I was still technically in the Army and everything, but I didn't feel like a soldier. I didn't act like a soldier. I never really handled weakness real well, and people always told me not to view my injury as weakness, but I view it as weakness, and I still view it as weakness to this day. And whenever you're weak in something, then you make improvements and to not be that way anymore. But it wasn't that simple at the beginning. I couldn't walk, had no prosthetics, couldn't do anything for myself. I couldn't feed myself, bathe myself, take myself to the bathroom. And it's just a very hard life where you can't do anything. And you're completely dependent on somebody else or multiple other people. And so I just fell into this heavy depression and started thinking about suicide because I couldn't see into the future. I couldn't see 3 years down the road. I couldn't see 10 years down the road that life could get better. I could just live in that moment every day in, day out, day in. That seemed like an eternity of somebody else taking care of me. And about the 18th month mark post-injury, I got to take my first prosthetic home. And that night, Mom made dinner and cut it up for me, and I got to feed myself for the very first time. And it was that little bit of glimpse of independence that really just like, I'm doing something for myself. Somebody else isn't doing this for me. I'm doing it. And then soon I got my second prosthetic, and then it was, I can do my hygiene. I can get dressed. I can get out of the house. I can go do events. I picked up skydiving, and I even flew the Red Bull Flugtag. We made our own aircraft and flew it into the water, and I was the pilot with no hands. I did all these things, and but when I was going through that depression, when I was suicidal, I couldn't see those things happening. So I just had to buy out the time until things got better. And I think anybody who's struggling is going to probably say the same thing. It's great to have faith and believe it's going to get better, but Everybody, it's a different amount of time for everybody, and for me, it was almost 18 months of living in a very, very dark place before it got better.
And how fast did it get better once you started to gain that independence?
It just moved right along like it didn't even exist anymore. I mean, I've always been an active guy. I've always been somewhat of an adrenaline junkie, so it was time to get back to living life again, and that's exactly what I did.
So you got a promotion while you were in recovery to Sergeant First Class, but ultimately you knew that your military career would be over. So how soon did you figure out what you wanted to do?
Well, initially I was actually going to try to stay in the Army. I was working with the Sergeant Major of the Army at the time, Sergeant Major Preston, about some different positions that I could possibly hold. And what I really wanted to do is rewrite the policies and procedures for when soldiers were injured. Before we deployed, we planned if you get killed, you had everything squared away. Your will was taken care of. You knew everything that, T's were crossed, I's were dotted. You were well prepared in case you died. But we had no preparation really for if we got injured. So I really wanted to make an impact there. Like, if you have a family and you have kids in school and you have a mortgage, are you going to pull your kids out of school to take them to the major medical facility, whether it's Walter Reed or Brooke Army or Bethesda in San Diego? Can you afford a mortgage and rent if you go to that other place? There's all these questions and things that we weren't prepared for. And I just thought it was important. And the Sergeant Major of the Army liked the idea. It was just, who are you going to fall under? And I knew I was actually going to get one more promotion if I would have stayed in. But I was basically told that would be my last promotion. I would never be able to compete for Sergeant Major. And they weren't sure that they could give me the job I wanted. And so at that point, I just made the decision it was time for me to get out of the Army and go into the civilian sector to try to make a difference. And, I find my inspiration from the Vietnam era veterans. When they came home, there was no welcome home ceremony for those guys. They got spit on. A lot of them had to change out of their uniforms in the airport and into civilian clothes so they wouldn't get mobbed in the streets. The VA didn't give them any benefits. They had to hit Capitol Hill and start lobbying and politicking for their own benefits to be able to be taken care of. And, we're almost 60 years down the road, and, they're still getting benefits. Agent Orange just got approved a couple of years ago, but they never gave up. They never gave up fighting. A lot of the benefits I have today are because of the Vietnam era veterans fighting for those benefits. So it was time for me to kind of step up and maybe do some of that fighting too, and see if I can help improve for the next generations and my generation of things that we need improvement on. So I've been on Capitol Hill. I've spoken in front of Congress and Senate. I've spoken in raising awareness with corporate America as a professional speaker. I've given back to several veteran charities, and so that's my role today as I, it's different than being a soldier, but in a lot of the same aspects, it's quite similar.
I read a quote from you, judging how much concern you had for your men at the time of the explosion. The first part of this strikes me as a little bit odd, but you said before the explosion, your life was all about you. Since then, it's been all about others. Explain how that mindset came about.
Well, I definitely feel that way. Pre-injury, life was a lot about me. It was about having a good time and doing your job. And, in the military, there is a lot of, we always say, it's about teamwork. In order to get a mission done, you have to have teamwork. You have to be able to work well with others and combine your resources to be able to complete the mission. But there's a lot of me in the military too. So if I didn't study, if I didn't better prepare myself, if I wasn't more physically fit than the guy next to me, I wasn't going to get to go to the schools. I wasn't going to get promoted. So if you're not outperforming your peers, you're just kind of in a baseline area that just you're moving along the career path just at a regular pace. But if you want to get better than that and fast track it all, you have to be better than everybody else. And the only way to be better than everybody else is me. Take care of me. Make sure I'm doing what I got to do. And even on my off time, it was about having fun. I really didn't have passion for others. It was about having a good time and me. And I would take care of my soldiers because I need them. They're part of my team. I'm still going to take care of them. But it wasn't like it is today. Now, post-injury, I live a very blessed life. Because of the injury, I do have financial benefits. Because of the Gary Sinise Foundation, who graciously gave me a home in Georgia to live in. I have a good career now. I don't have the stresses that a lot of people have. The money, no, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. I'm not worrying about a promotion at work because, let's face it, I'm my own boss. If I'm not getting that promotion, it's only one guy to blame. And so it allows me the unique opportunity to use the majority of my life for giving back. And if I had to put it in some kind of percentage, I would probably say about 70% of the time is all volunteer, and the other 30% is what I consider my professional, kind of my paid life. And so I give more of my time for charity than I do for myself. And it's because I have those unique things that I've been blessed with that allows me that opportunity. I think a lot of people would volunteer more time or resources if they didn't have those stressors, if they didn't have to worry about where their next paycheck is going to come from.
Just a couple of quick questions before we let you go. What advice do you have to a soldier or a family who's recently had this type of traumatic event in their lives? You obviously went through it. You've got a decade since then. For those who are just now coming into this crisis, what do you tell them?
I would say that you need to stay positive. I mean, even if you're in that depression, even if you're in those dark days still, and that goes both for the warrior and the family members, whether it's the kids, the wife, the husband, mothers, fathers who are caring for their injured sons and daughters. Life is going to be very, very bad at the beginning. And if you need help, there's a lot of resources out there that are willing to help you, but you're going to have to be proactive. Those resources don't necessarily know that you're there. They don't know that you just moved back home or you're stationed somewhere. So you're going to have to get proactive and see what's in your community or see what's nationally available to you to help you with whatever your needs might be, whether it's financial or adaptability, trying to get a vehicle adapted. You're going to have to do some research with the VA. The VA has its problems, and they're working on getting it fixed. But the problem with the VA is it's not a 2 or 3 year fix. The problems that we have in the VA right now are a 10-year fix. So it's going to take some time. So you're going to have to do your research to figure out how to manage that and get the benefits you deserve. And there's going to be a lot of red tape, but you got to be proactive. You got to stay positive. And lastly, you got to get out of the house. Don't isolate yourself. Isolation is bad for anybody, whether you're military, civilian, anybody going through a hard time. Isolation is not going to do anybody any good, and that's for the warriors or the family members. And then, especially for the family members, is take care of yourself. I know you worry about your loved ones, that you want to take care of them, but you're no good to them if you're not taking care of yourself. My mother's been my caregiver for over 10 years. She helps me out with all the things I still have trouble doing. But at the early days, I saw it where her whole life was dedicated to me. She didn't have time to take care of herself. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't eating properly. I saw her health diminish. We'd go to these events together, and everybody wanted to hear my story or talk to me or rush me up to the limelight. And where was she left? She was left in the corner with nobody to talk to. Nobody asked her story. Nobody asked her how she was doing. And a lot of loved ones get pushed away and pushed to the side because, the sons, the daughters, the husbands, the wives, whoever that warrior is, the soldier, Marine, or airman, is put on a pedestal. But, there are organizations out there to help family members. Again, you'd have to be proactive, but don't lose sight of taking care of yourself. The dark days are probably still ahead of you a little bit, but but it gets better. I mean, it's hard to see 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, but I know my challenges and my recovery built me into a stronger guy.
And lastly, as you look back to your time in uniform, what are you most proud of?
I would just say the fact that I got to serve in uniform. You know, a lot of people want to serve their nation, and for whatever reason, you know, maybe they have a disability that prevented them from serving. Maybe they got a little too wild in their youth and had something on the legal side of things that prevented them from serving. But man, I love my time in service. I'm very, very proud of my time in the Army. Every position I held, every rank I held, every duty job I got to do, duty position, all had impact on me. I wouldn't change any of it, and I'm just really glad I got the chance to serve, and I still keep that pretty close to me. I mean, it's a big part of who I am. It will always be a big part of who I am, but it's also a big part of why I give back to the veteran community.
Sergeant Schlitz, thank you so much for your service to our country, and thank you very much for your time with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
U.S. Army Ranger veteran and Sergeant First Class Michael Schlitz, and this is Veterans Chronicles.